to the state's attorney before the meeting and thank him personally. What he's giving us is going to really enhance Park Forest's capacity as far as what the donation is, what the amount is, and what it's doing with our canine program and outfitting a vehicle. I will defer to our chief of police. Chief?
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Last summer, when Canine Toby passed away, our canine program was put on a pause for some time. And moving forward, we had to decide how we would reintroduce the canine program. And of course, one of the challenges is in how we fund that program. Not only do you pay for the dog, but you pay for the training for the dog, for the handler, outfitting the vehicle, getting a new vehicle. So there's a lot of expenses involved with that. We reached out to Will County State's Attorney Jim Glasgow, who graciously and generously agreed to donate the cost of both the canine, the training, and the outfitting of the vehicle. The donation amount ended up being almost $18,000, so not an insignificant amount. It certainly was able to quickly propel us back into the canine business here in Park Forest. I'm proud to introduce tonight our newest canine handler, which is Officer Charles Carl. Officer Carl is a 3-year veteran. In fact, March 14th was his 3-year anniversary with us. Veteran of the Park Forest Police Department. He was an Officer of the Year nominee this past year and just an outstanding patrol officer. And he has with him his newest partner, Canine Tucker. Canine Tucker is an 18-month-old Dutch Shepherd and already has had 2 successful trackings of offenders. Unfortunately, or fortunately, it was the same offender both times. But he's already proving his worth, in this case, solving 2 felonies for us. So, you know, the investment, you can put a number on the investment made, the amount of the investment made. What you can't put an amount on is all the crime prevented, all the crime caught, all the prosecutions we're able to make because of having a canine unit. I myself was never a canine handler, but with my father being a police officer and a canine handler, I grew up with the canine in the home. So I know both sides, both the personal side and the professional side, and I can't say enough how much of an asset these animals are in the police profession. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Will County State's Attorney James Glasgow. Thank you.
Well, you can thank your chief for being creative and paying attention to what was going on in the law enforcement community. I was in the process of buying drug dogs for a number of municipalities. It started out with Shanahan, and then we moved on to Shorewood and Rockdale and Elwood and Wilmington. And I felt it was absolutely essential that I do it because I'm seizing this money from drug dealers. And I can let it sit there in the bank, or I can use it and feed it back into the community. And I thought, what better way than to buy dogs that can do 2 things, well, in addition to the tracking, but the 2 things were revolving around drugs. The first is to nail the drug dealers, because heroin today is like, you know, handing a young child a loaded gun, spinning the barrel and saying, put it to your head and pull the trigger. You never know with any batch of heroin that you buy what the intensity, the potency is. And then these depraved monsters are putting fentanyl into the mix. And it's 50 to 100 times more potent than heroin. And so these are not scientists with specific calibrations on their measurements. They're just mixing it. My neighbor 2 doors down just buried her 25-year-old nephew who played baseball with one of my sons. And we've got a lead on who gave it to him, and we're going to aggressively pursue a drug-induced homicide if we're successful. That's a very difficult charge to prove, but I think it's important that we do it, and especially when it's the dealer. In addition to being charged with dealing the heroin, we throw on a drug-induced homicide conviction, which adds a substantial sentence, which is well-deserved. I wish it could be attempt murder or murder, whatever we could do, but we're not there yet. And it's hard to understand how someone could knowingly sell this stuff just to make a few bucks. I mean, it's just ruthless. We're very fortunate in Will County. We've got tremendous undercover officers with a lot of snitches. And if you're pitching any amount of heroin in Will County, we take you out. The problem is you can drive 40 minutes north into Chicago and buy all the heroin that you want. I still don't understand how that is. We have a conference every year. I had a social worker come up to me and say, if you want to get in my car, I can take you up to a gas station, 4 gas stations, and we can buy as much heroin as we want. And I wish I would have taken her up on that and brought some officers with me, but that just doesn't happen in Will County. And I know you've got about a third of your village in Will County, and we're happy to have you. If you want to chase your criminals into Will County, make sure that they're taken care of. But getting back to the dogs also, you can run this dog through a school and get hits on lockers, not to arrest the kids, but to get the drugs away from the kids and get them into treatment. Our drug court has been phenomenal. I had the honor of writing the drug court grant back in 1998, never imagining that our drug court would be so instrumental in saving the lives of heroin addicts right now. Once they're arrested, we lock them up for 6 months, and that gives them a chance to dry out. The heroin addiction, it alters your brain chemistry, and it takes 2 to 3 months of sobriety before you're even malleable enough to accept the treatment that we're going to offer. One of the kids described it as a fog lifting and finally realizing and remember who he was. The intensity of the addiction, you know, I'm 68 years old, and so when I talk about Popeye Doyle and the French Connection, a lot of people don't know what I'm talking about. But he was the toughest cop that there's ever been. And in French Connection 2, the bad guys kidnap him, they duct tape him to a chair, and they shoot him up with heroin, and they owned him. That would happen to any one of us. As tough as we might think we are, as honorable as we might think we are, we can overcome anything. Heroin changes you in a way that you have no control over your own actions anymore. And you don't care if you live or die, you just want your next hit. And that's what we're facing with this epidemic. And so without a dog, you are really hamstrung in attacking the dealers and helping the kids. So hopefully Tucker will do that. He's a beautiful dog. He's very friendly. I hope he's a little more aggressive in the field. But, you know, I've got 3 dogs. I'm only supposed to have 2 in Joliet, but I don't think they're counting. I just lost my Great Dane in August, and we've got 2 little 10-pound dogs. One's a rescue, but we just got a standard poodle. It's going to be about 70 pounds, and I'm really anxious because apparently they're incredibly athletic dogs. You know, a lot of times you see them with the crazy haircuts and everything, but underneath that haircut is a lean, mean, athletic dog that'll catch a frisbee, and their feet are webbed for swimming. So they're just all-around athletes, and I'm looking forward to having fun with him this summer. But getting back to the dogs, I've got one last dream. Jerry Schnee was just teasing me that I've been around too long, but they're going to have to drag me out of the office. Just in knowing what the dogs do for me at home, how, you know, when I come home at night, it's just, dogs aren't your whole life, but they make your life whole. And try to be the human being that your dog thinks that you are. That says a lot about what they are and what they do for us. And we have 5 dogs that work for me, 4 of them at the Child Advocacy Center, and 1 that is an electronic detection dog that we've been using in our child pornography unit, and we can also use it on drug busts and financial crimes. But if we could get a situation where we get everybody being conscious and aware of the cruelty that's being done to animals in our community and stop it. But it requires a coordination, it requires more training. Everything comes through my office, everything serious comes through my office. We just seized 5 pit bulls that were horribly treated, and you know, we're looking for placement for those dogs. But if I had all the rescues organized, if I had all the humane societies in communication with me, and then training for all of the animal enforcement officers, so that when they bring me a case, I've got the evidence that I need to charge it and win it in court. And then lastly, I've got to change some of our statutes that are so poorly written. I'm very proud of the fact that in 1999 I wrote the Animal Torture Bill, which basically makes it unlawful to torture any animal, not just companion animals. And the reason being is, say you had a rabbit in your garden and you would set a trap for it. You can't then take that rabbit, hang it by its feet, and torture it, set it on fire, whatever. Because if you do, you're a budding John Wayne Gacy or Richard Dahmer, and the law that I wrote requires a mandatory psychiatric evaluation for anyone arrested and convicted of animal torture. And if Dahmer and Gacy had been arrested and convicted on those, they would have caught them a lot faster. So, you know, it's 1200 AD, and I don't want to get religious here, but a guy named St. Francis of Assisi said, the way men treat animals will be reflective of how they treat each other. And that's really what it's all about. Developing compassion in young people towards animals, it'll foster respect for each other, and hopefully diminish some of the violence that we're seeing in our society today. Look, we've got violent video games that are just horrendous. I don't know, you know, we're all older here, but if you ever saw what the level of depravity that some of our children are playing, it's harming them. You know, the industry says it doesn't, but we know better. Ultimate fighting, where people are brutalized in a cage. When they're knocked down, that's when they are attacked. Now, Marcus de Queensberry, you never heard a man when he's down? When he's down? That's what held our society together, is that kind of honor, and that's being lost. So hopefully we can turn this around with efforts like the League of Extraordinary Canines and good people in the community pulling together. And that's why this dog is so important to your community, and I'm glad I was able to help. You know, we're going to continue to go after the drug dealers and seize whatever property we can from them, and then turn around and plow it back in. I've bought vehicles for a lot of our at-risk agencies. There's a local car dealer named Terry Darcy who's partnered with me on that, and it's just phenomenal. And the officers and I were talking. I've got a young man working on an amortization, or whatever you would call it, where you take a person and take them out 75 years as a positive member of society or a negative member of society, and what's the difference over a 75-year lifespan? Because you as elected officials have to make decisions, and we tend to be instant gratification. We want to, you know, put some money into something to see results right away, but you don't always see it right away. And if we could show you that, you know, my drug court's a good example. A kid can go through drug court and come out clean, no convictions, or he could be a convicted felon. And then what happens? And we see the downward spiral. So the more we can do to fund programs that'll keep people from falling off the apple cart, because the costs of getting them back are extraordinary. And that's really where we've got to focus. And this is a prevention tool right here. We'll never be able to prove all the people that he saves over his 10-year career, but there'll be a legion. And maybe we need to keep better statistics, and then they can bring them in here, so when you need your next dog, you'll have the money set aside for that. And one last thing, I'm trying to get legislation so that when this dog retires, there'll be a health insurance policy for him. Because what's been happening is the officer takes the dog who's battle-torn. Many of these dogs get hit by cars, they get shot, they get injured, and then the officer loves the dog and he takes him into his home, but now the dog is going to need more medical care than the average dog. Why should that be the responsibility of the officer? And if every year you put a little money aside for this policy that'll be necessary for this dog at the end of his career, and you can do that now without any legislation. I'm just hoping to make it mandatory statewide, but you know, if you choose to do that, it's just like if you build a public improvement and you don't put a little fund aside to repair it and replace it. We're paying the price for that, aren't we, on a lot of things? So it's the same thing that goes with Tucker. So hopefully he will do all the things that we know he can do, and you'll have a safer community. And you know, thanks for having me out here.
Thank you.